Nixle, are you trying to say that if you sign up for Nixle, every time there's some type of altercation, will be noticed?
No, but it's in, so let me ask one thing before you say.
Sure.
So, a bicycle got stolen at, off a light pole across from the train station. Does that rise to the level that I should notice everybody in the community that a bicycle was stolen? Now you tell me, you're the public. No. So there should be levels. If there's a couple of break-ins on Ridgedale Avenue, why not send a Twitter out or a Nixle to all the people that are in that trajected area? There was a couple attempted break-ins. And go to your tip sheet. Lock your doors. Keep your light on. Like I've learned to keep my porch light on Wetmore Avenue now. I never shut it off at night. It's always on. You know, I don't want to talk because the press is here, they'll read everything I say, but my son was involved. Well, and I say this because this was taught by the police chief for when I was a councilman. So my son came home one night and he was sitting on my porch and he noticed someone walking down the street that didn't recognize the neighborhood, and he saw him lifting car doors. He laid down on the porch and he had Lieutenant Cregan's phone number. He was an officer at the time because he was my neighbor's, married to my neighbor. So he called him from his porch at 3 o'clock in the morning, laying there. I'm inside sleeping. True story. And they were able to come. He was able to stay on the phone, and the police department was able to come in through a different way. And he must have saw the cops coming, and he ducked in a car. And my son was able to tell police officers he's in that third car. And they made the arrest, and he would have had to go to court, but he pleaded. He didn't have to go to court. But it is what you see every day in your neighborhoods. You can sense something doesn't fit, or there's something wrong, or somebody's acting out of character, and you know your neighborhood, you know your neighbors. But we have stressed this 30 times in meetings, through neighborhoods and through different organizations and in people's homes and neighborhoods where people have come in, the police chief, myself, and others, on the awareness of safety and just life in general, that there are bad people out there. There are bad people out there. And that's everywhere we go. And, you know, Lynn, let me just get a couple other questions. The councilman in the back wants to ask a question.
No, Mayor, I think you just answered the question.
Oh, sorry.
Because I think the clarification folks are looking for is at what point do you let the public know?
Yeah.
And I think you just answered that
I think the
question.
chief will.
And I think what you're saying is if you see a pattern, you will inform the public.
Absolutely.
Right, but
Absolutely.
I want to clarify, and no, this is not a disparaging comment to the press, but we have found out through our road races that when we just did press releases, people just don't have the time to read the paper anymore. So and I will tell you that for as many people are in this room, there are some people, and I will clarify something, it was not the Hyatt, it was years ago at Headquarters Plaza Hotel when it was first being built, and they were trying to attract people to Morristown. There will be as many people calling me up and saying, why do you have to put that in the paper? And that's the truth. God's honest truth. So if it's me, I'm putting a lot of stuff out there. I think we need to learn from this that, policing has always been, community policing has always been a 50-50 thing. That is the true nature of community policing. And what bothers me, and this is in the paper, what bothers me is that this is simple logic, but I think it's cop logic. Okay, if you look at the two sets of circumstances and the number of apartments, you have a couple of attempts and you have a couple entered and nobody saw anything. Nobody saw anything. And that bothers me. That means we need to start looking more. Just like we need to be more vigilant, we need to be looking more for suspicious behavior without a press release, without notification. We should be looking out for our neighbors without the police telling us to. That's the way I feel. Because you guys know better what's unusual in your neighborhood.
Just a real quick comment.
Sure, stand up.
What you just said. So, safe town, we get that, and perception that it's a safe town, which we're getting by not hearing about all the minutia. But then we get lulled into the sense of we don't need to look for things because we're not hearing it. So there's got to be a balance between how much you put out to keep us a little bit nervous.
disagree at
so
all.
we're looking.
But I have found, take September 11th, the most tragic thing that happened in this country. And there was vigilance for months after. There's not so much vigilance anymore. There just simply isn't. People don't like inconvenience. They just don't. And that's, you know, I do survival courses. I tell people all the time that you need to have a practice and a policy in your own brain of keeping yourself safe by being vigilant all the time. And you know, I'm telling you, people are tunnel vision. They got their heads in their screens. They're walking out to their cars. And sometimes I feel like if someone's burglarizing their neighbor's house, they wouldn't even see them. So, listen, I will take all this. I'm in the most criticized profession in the world. Am I not? And I'll take all that criticism. Yeah. You look for all these votes. I'm in the second most criticized profession. But I am always, we've never said, the history of policing is always that you work with the community. And I've never said I have all the best ideas. And if you all want to come up with a better way to be notified, and you're telling me as Morristown residents you want to be notified more, I have no problem with that. I got guys downstairs that'll come up with the best technology to make sure that you're notified.
Before I go to the next question, was anybody in the room here in the neighborhoods where they were being hit by the special tires and rims they were taking? You remember that?
I do.
Okay, so we had meetings, we went out to the neighborhood. Was anybody else in here when the group that were going around knocking on doors acting like salesmen and they weren't, and if you weren't home they tried to break into your house? Was anybody in the wards that happened? That's so you were spared. That happened a lot in the first ward. Do you remember the person who had they were in their house, lights were on, and the wheels taken right off their car, and their dog was barking like crazy, and they never attributed to the dog barking like crazy that something was going on outside where they were taking their wheels off the car. But they do it so fast, right?
Right.
They were in, and 30 seconds gone. And they're professional thieves.
And this is, okay, so you want that notification, right? They're professional thieves. Do you think they're going to come back in 2 weeks? This is just a general statement about burglars, whose profession it is. Their territory is larger than your block. So you know what they know? They know you'll be vigilant for a while until nothing happens for a few weeks or a month or 2 months. And they come back because they know it's human nature to not be so vigilant.
And that makes sense for an individual actor who has come out when he does his thing and he takes tires, right? But if we know about that, then we're thinking, oh, my dog is barking, and I know that somebody's been taking tires. They may not be coming back for a couple of months, but now my dog is barking.
But we had those meetings and they didn't
But
even
see,
react.
this is what I don't understand. Well, this is the O.J. Simpson thing. If you looked into that deeply, a dog is barking for a very, 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 very long time. Why does it take a notification for someone to say that's unusual? We've had this. We've had very few times. We've had a shot fired and people waiting to call the police because they didn't think that anything like that could happen in their neighborhood, and the next day we find shell casings.
I think you're making my point for me, which is we don't think that stuff is going to happen because we're not told that it's happening.
No, I am saying I will notify you.
But the police are out in the neighborhoods canvassing door to door.
I'm telling you
Things
that
like
your
that
energy will dissipate. But look, I hope it maintains. I said this to the mayor, okay? I have been to at least 7-10 meetings like this, and despite our pleas, and I don't use absolutes very often, there has never been a second meeting. Now, most of the times we caught somebody, but there has never been a second meeting.
A few years ago, I get up early around maybe 6 o'clock. I moved the car from my driveway. I saw two guys. They don't belong to the neighborhood. I saw the car. I called the police. I said, there's somebody here stealing the cars. who was right. They stole 3 cars that night, and the police came, he said, thank you, we've been looking for them since 3 o'clock. You see somebody, call.
Yes.
Very easy.
Yeah, we were discussing before I get to your question, we were discussing some issues the other day, and he goes, oh, by the way, Mayor, I think unless I misunderstood him, somebody was just on your street lifting car doors, right?
Yeah, they were entering cars.
They were entering cars.
Unlocked cars at the end of
during
your
the day.
block. 3 days ago.
Yeah, unlocked cars. Unlocked cars. And they hit my, I woke up one morning, I opened my door, I go, oh, it's open, and my glove compartment was open. I'm like, oh, I know, I didn't lock my door. And they took a $35 marine plug and probably sold it for $5 because we all know that we're in the middle of an opiate crisis. And that's not just Morristown, it's all over, not just this county, all over the state and the nation. I know, Karen, but there's other people.
Just, I know that, we've worked together for a long time, Pete, and I know that community policing is really an important part of what you do, and you did catch that guy pretty quickly. But one of the things that will help me to sleep at night is knowing that you have a specific criteria you would use to determine, you talked about different levels, what is the criteria you would use to notify people that there is a risk or that there's a concern?
Well, I can address the term rash of burglars. If there's a lot of depends and there's a lot of ifs. Okay, if we had a true rash of burglars, but we are running 2 burglaries a month. That's our average, and in these particular cases, there was 1 burglary, 1 location November, 1 location December. Yes, if I had 5 locations hit, as we say in our police jargon, if I had 5 residents hit on one day, or 3, or even 2, that to me would generate. But again, I'm always willing to change. I think burglaries are an invasion. They are. They're an invasion of your personal space. And I have no problem with, from this meeting forward, getting every burglary out to anybody that signs up for any technology.
I think that I'm more concerned about the sexual assault.
Yes.
And that there was a sexual assault down the street from me,
Yes.
and I didn't know. So, and that person was out, and you didn't know where he was for the 30, you probably knew where he was, but at what point will I learn that I need to be more careful even just walking down the street? If somebody steals something of mine, I'm not that concerned. But if, physically I'm at risk, or my kids are, my daughters are at risk, I don't want that to happen.
Okay.
So how would I know that you're gonna let me know?
I can tell you in the simplest of terms that once the prosecutor's office takes over, which they take over in every serious matter, I can't tell you. I can't.
So maybe we need to talk to the prosecutor.
But I can tell you that, I can tell you based on my briefings that everybody in Morristown was safe.
If you believe there's an imminent threat.
And that is what I was able to tell the mayor, who reasonably wanted more information. I said, Mayor, I can tell you that nobody in Morristown is in danger right now.
And that was my concern. So my concern is I have to trust our law enforcement, and it's a big thing. But I trust our police department. We have a great, and I've said it publicly, the best police department in our county. No defense, chief, in the back.
He's better than that.
So I forgot that he was standing there. But that was the question that obviously I asked our chief, and I demanded to know more information, and he very politely put me in my place. And because it's rules that I have to follow too. But my question is, the public at risk. He knows that the public's at risk, and if the public was at risk,
Yes.
he'd be the first person on the street, in my opinion. He probably wouldn't be the first person, but you know where I'm going. He clearly would have had the public notified. He made his law enforcement experience and his ability to solve a large amount of crime over many years. And their investigative techniques and our detective bureau and our police officers on the street, it's not a 20 square mile community, it's 2.9 square miles. They know it in and out. His decision clearly based on law and what he's allowed to do based on the prosecutor, which is the lead guy in the county, Morris County prosecutor. If the public was at risk, he would have been on.
So it was helpful just to know that it wasn't just that the prosecutor said you couldn't tell anybody,
Right.
but that you had made an assessment that we were not at risk,
Right.
which is why you didn't tell us.
And-
So that's very important distinction for me.
And I did get phone calls besides the mayor, and I was able to say that. And when the mayor asked me what he could say, I said, you can say exactly that. And that's all you can say.
And that's when the phone call came, and they had, I don't know, I said, I have to talk to the prosecutor. Why? I have all the information. Only in the back. Yes, sir.
Hi. First of all, thank you for being here tonight. This is great. I have two hats. One, I represent a condo association, so we're looking for things we can do to protect ourselves. And the other is, I'm a commissioner of Crime Stoppers in Morris County. And so I have a question, and for those of you that don't know what Crime Stoppers is, it's a not-for-profit that works in collaboration with the prosecutor, the sheriff's office, and I think the Association of Police Chiefs. It's a conduit of information from the public to law enforcement, so we have two sets of clients. So the question I have for you guys is how can Crime Stoppers help you be better at what you do? Because it is a conduit of information. And you don't have to answer all the questions. I'd love to work with you, learn that. We're in the process of trying to reassess ourselves so that we can better position ourselves. Some more people know about it. And it's a way to create information from the public to law enforcement.
I could simply tell you that I don't have the specific numbers, but we have used Crime Stoppers in the past, and we will continue to use them. Did we use them on these particular burglaries? I don't believe we did. But-
So
Go ahead.
the other point, and that wasn't really the specific cause and effect, but what Crime Stoppers can do is if you see something peculiar in your community that you don't like, or even simple things like kids getting older, they can text or call a number, it's anonymous, and the information will be filtered to law enforcement. Last year, I think there were 200 tips, 160 were investigated, led to 120 arrests. In a county like Morris County, that could be quadrupled, and you might be affected. So it's looking to work in an
Right.
effective way.
Well, it's an extreme case, but I watch national news for one reason. Because there's a lot of information in the national news. And what happened out in California with those 13 kids really bothers me. And I know it bothers a lot of people that the neighbors should have seen or known something. That's a huge frustration in policing because it's very common that when we are investigating a crime, that people will call us up and say, you know, there was something weird going on there, but I didn't want to bother you guys. And I will tell you again, I've said this at least 100 times in all these meetings, you are not bothering the police. And if you get that cop that sounds like you're bothering them, then you call my office direct and I will take care of that.
Yes, Bob.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey,
I
Bob.
don't think it's a matter of bothering the police. I think everybody actually, we have a lot of confidence in our police department, we really do. And I think the way administration and the police handle this specific incident is a good one. But I think the theme that you're hearing is we have gotten quite safe, and we don't notice, we don't call. So I think what Peter's maybe suggesting here is you kind of need a theme. You need something that is always in our heads, because You used the example of the cars being ripped off, Mayor. That was our next door neighbor.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, the dog did not bark. I wish Polo would bark at anybody. That dog.
No, I don't think, it wasn't that house.
It was not, but it really was literally 20 feet away from Karen. I was up that night and no one knew, you know? But I think to move this forward, you know, can we use a program like Crime Stoppers to kind of get the theme there that helps you educate us to be aware and remind us on an ongoing basis? Because I think the point that they're trying to make also over here is knowing the stats on crime is important for us. Because if we know there's only 25 burglaries, we know that's a relatively low number.
Right.
But we're also aware of the fact there's burglaries in town, lock your door. That there's cars in town. It does get out there in dribs and drabs, but we kind of lose it. And what I'm saying is maybe what we're hearing here is we need some kind of theme that kind of carries that awareness forward, whether it's Crime Stoppers or something similar. I don't know.
That's actually a segue into, it's a problem not just with criminality. The mayor is very concerned about some of the, and Ms. Deeb is concerned about this as well. I know I saw her in here. Is concerned about the number of motor vehicle crashes, we have to call them crashes now because of state police, involving pedestrians. But I invite you, I know, I invite, and sometimes, about 50% of the time, it's the pedestrian's fault. No, not, I said 50, I said 50. All you gotta do is sit with me at Starbucks and watch how people cross the street. Now, I know you have the right of way when you have the crosswalk, but that doesn't mean you don't look both ways. It's general complacency about, look,
When there's 4 lanes and you're in the middle
So-
of the pedestrian walk and they're buzzing around me, I'm
listen,
like this.
this is
Every
a
week.
busy town.
Yes.
It's a busy town. I teach survival. Survival is not, I do it. I teach to my kids. I've been teaching survival since Columbine, because there are ways to save yourself. There's little things you could do, and there's weird things that happen to people when they don't, and a lot of people have died because they don't know where the exits are. People go out the same door. They don't know that there's an exit over there. But it's a 24/7 thing. Just like we talked about locking your doors. It's a 24/7 thing. Cops, why do we carry guns? We carry guns not because there's a probability we will use them. It's a very low probability. We carry guns because there's a possibility we might have to use them. You guys need to think like us. Always be safe. Always be concerned. Always be looking for something that's unusual and call the police. Never feel totally safe. I'm not obsessed by it, but I never get in a position, and I teach my kids the same thing. Don't ever feel totally safe. Always be thinking, here's a game you can play. I tell this to people all the time. You want to play spot the cop. Go to any restaurant or bar, theater. Watch the threshold. Black, white, Spanish, male, female, young, old, alone, or with kids. Where's Steve Beecher standing? Safest place in this room. Every cop does the same thing, subconsciously. Stops for a half a second. It's not even that long. Assessing threat, avenue of escape. And I think everybody should think that way. When you're on a plane and they're doing this, you know what they say? People that actually listen, they survive. They survive. And you know what most people do when there's a plane, anything happening on a plane? I'm sorry with this segue. Because they don't train their brain to get out of the plane, what's the first thing they do? They go for their carry-on luggage, and they die because of it. So the theme is always be on your guard. Always be on your guard. Always lock your doors. Car, don't leave that one window open. I bet you if I go to every one of your houses, I'll get in within, and I'm not a burglar, but I know how to get in people's houses. It's real simple. Find the unlocked window. And second floor isn't that difficult to get to.
So segueing into your comments, which I think is exactly what I was hoping to hear, was, look, I don't know about you guys, but I work full-time for New Jersey Devils. I work full-time at this, being mayor. So I can't think of everything all the time. We all have busy lives, right? And we expect certain level of policing and safety and all that goes with being taxpayers and living in the community. If we can get people signed up to the technology that we have the availability to send quick messages out, sure enough, you know enough people in your neighborhood. Hey, did you get that text from the police chief and the mayor or the administration that there was 2 break-ins down on Ridgedale Avenue, 2 days ago? Attempted break-ins, just to keep you informed. I think that's the easiest thing for us to do because the technology is available for us to do that. Again, this is tragic what happened. I think I understand the policing process. One here, one there, no different, no large amounts, no different than the year before, where our averages are low. As Councilman Iannicone commented, our thefts are low compared to the other communities. We're in good shape. Crime-wise, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think you understand where I'm going. I think that we are in the age of technology that Councilman Iannicone brought this up to me last week prior to this, that we set a policy, we put the policy in place that if a couple of attempted burglaries, even if it's one, happens on Ridgedale Avenue, that you blanket a certain level of area, whether it's a 8 block, and you can do that with technology. You don't have to send it to the person living on Mount Kimball Avenue right next to the township.
I have a question.
I mean, there's ways to do it, so I appreciate that's exactly where I want to go.
I have a question of you.
Morristown.